This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the result against West Ham United by bringing my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and James Tompkins after the game. So let's begin. A Wilfried Zaha strike 6 minutes into stoppage time completed a spirited second half fight back for Palace, as they snatched a deserved point against West Ham United. A poor start for the Eagles saw them go into the break 2-0 behind thanks to goals from Javier, Hernandez and Ayew, but Luka Milivojevic reduced the affairs from the penalty spot in 50 minutes to set up a grandstand second half. Only some inspired goalkeeping from Joe Hart managed to deny the Eagles an early equaliser, with Roy Hodgson's team striking the woodwork twice. But with seconds remaining, Zaha converted a fine solo effort to lift spirits in SE25. Unlike the rip-roaring start against Chelsea a fortnight earlier, this game began in very quiet fashion, with the only moment of note from the opening half an hour coming when Patrick was forced off with a tweaked hamstring. But in 30 minutes the game imploded into life with action at both ends, but unfortunately it led to Palace conceding the opener. After Zaha was denied a penalty by Bobby Madley, despite being clumsily clipped by Jose Font, the Hammers took advantage of that fortune and countered. A slick passing move between Manuel Lanzini, Ayew and Aaron Cresswell saw the left-back slip in a low centre into the box, and the poacher Hernandez netted in stylish first-time finish with the outside of his foot to score his fourth of the campaign. The Eagles nearly found a swift leveller when a spot off her tennis broke out after a corner, leading to James Tompkins forcing Hart to pour the ball back into the danger zone. But as it pinged around the box, Jeffrey Slupp seemed to turn it home, but somehow the ball flicked off the arm of the England number 1 and over the crossbar. But with 3 minutes of the half remaining, the host's task got even tougher when Slaven Bilic's team found a second goal in 12 minutes. A weak back pass on the halfway line by Milivojevic allowed Ayew to race forward, and despite being held up by Scott Dan, he rifled a shot from outside the box into the top corner of Julian Speroni's goal to score for the third time in 4 days. Palace desperately needed something positive after the restart, and they got it just 4 minutes into the second half when Andres Townsend was tripped in the box by Ogbonna, and Milivojevic made up for his error by sending Hart the wrong way to inject some hope into the afternoon. The momentum instantly flowed towards Hodgson's team, and just 3 minutes after netting their first, they were a whisker away from netting an equaliser when Zaha and Slupp combined to tee up Young inside the D, and the Frenchman thumped an arcing effort off the post with Hart beaten, who then had to beat away a Zaha blast after some dazzling feat from the winger. The Hammers keeper was having a blinder, and he made 2 more good stops when a Zaha drive with his left foot was kept out by a fully stretched Hart, and then he had to be at his best again when Cabaye curled a delicious 25-yard kick over the wall as the pressure built. As the clock ticked on to 90, he would make another inspired save when Tompkins leapt highest from a corner, and the slightest of fingertips by Hart nudged the ball onto the crossbar, but it dropped back into the 6-yard box where Sako hooked it over from close range. It looked as though it was going to be one of those days for the Eagles, and with time ticking away, Bilic's team butchered a 3-on-1 opportunity on the counter, and from that Palace pounced. A burst from Loftus-Cheek eventually led to the ball finding its way to Zaha on the far side of the box, who twisted and turned inside the area before eventually getting a shot away, and it finally found its way past Hart to nestle into the bottom corner to spark wild celebrations around Selhurst Park. They left it late, but Crystal Palace salvaged a point thanks to a late-minute strike from Wilfried Zaha against West Ham United. The Eagles fought back from 2 goals down to claim a point at Selhurst Park, with Zaha's equaliser coming in the 7th minute of stoppage time, after Luka Milivojevic had earlier reduced the deficit from the penalty spot. But what did we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. The wait for a clean sheet continues. Crystal Palace may have scored in the game for only the 2nd time this season, but this was the 10th time they have conceded in 10 games so far this season. Palace are just one of 4 teams in the top 5 European leagues who are yet to keep a clean sheet this season, along with Benevento, Malaga and Dijon. Number 2. Several players step up. Crystal Palace received plenty of criticism in midweek after their performance of their fringe players in a 4-1 defeat against Bristol City. And when the team news was announced, Palace fans feared the worst with no Mamadou Sako or James McArthur in the matchday squad, as Palace's injury list became even longer. But the players who came into play in their places, James Tomkins and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, both performed well for the Eagles, with Tomkins unfortunate not to score against his old side, while Loftus-Cheek looked a threat going forward again. And others played well too out of position, with Jeffrey Slupp together with substitutes Timothy Fosu-Mensah and Bakary Sako, proving their versatility by playing out of their natural position. Number 3. Clinical Hammers. Julian Speroni didn't have too much to do on the day, but still had to pick the ball out of his net twice. West Ham only had 2 shots on target and scored twice, proving their clinical edge in front of goal. Palace, in contrast, had 19 shots on goal in total and 9 on target, but only managed to 2 goals as well. Number 4. At the heart of it. One reason for Palace not being this clinical in front of goal was the form of England goalkeeper Joe Hart. He put in a performance to silence his critics as he made numerous saves to deny Palace and in truth keep the Hammers ahead. If it had not been for him, Palace could have well won the game, and the Eagles would take to heart the number of chances they did create. And number 5, a costly error. With West Ham leading 2-1 in the 6th minute of injury time, they looked to have done enough to earn their first away win of the season. But despite beating Jeffrey Slupp down the wing, Mikel Antonio inexplicably crossed the ball into the area instead of keeping the ball in the corner. And it proved costly as Palace went straight down the other end to net the equaliser, with Zaha finding the net just 22 seconds later. Antonio was criticised for his decision, with West Ham boss Slaven Bilic describing it as a mistake that should not happen at Premier League level, while Match of the Day pundit Alan Shearer described West Ham's play in the closing stages as naive. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place for you to join in with discussions and share your opinions with other fans. And also, it is a great place for you to upload videos, photos and articles which you would like to share with the Palace community. Now, another great place to share your opinion and have discussions with other fans is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players out of 10, with 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And this could be how you thought the player performed throughout the game. And even if you don't want to do that, feel free to drop a comment below with your views on the game as a whole. And that's purely because I can go back on the video and see what the listeners thought about the game and listen to your guys' opinion, but also so that other fans, whether they be West Ham or Palace fans, they can come to the video and also see what other fans thought of the game as well. So really, the whole point of commenting is sharing your opinion so that others can see it. Now, if you do want to find any of these social media groups and pages, then do check all the links in the description below. But now we're going to move on to the player ratings, starting in goal with Julian Speroni, who I am going to give a 6. For large periods he had little to do. Got a hand to Hernandez's opener but should have done better, but was caught out by the change in direction. And was also well beaten by Ayew's thunderous strike. His quick distribution led to the counter-attack which led to Zaha's equaliser in the 97th minute. So Julian Speroni here, I've given him a 6, and from the legend, it was once again a very average performance. And when I say average, it's not a bad thing. I just thought that for quite a lot of the game he didn't actually have quite a lot to do, so there isn't really too much to praise him for, and there's very little as well to criticise him for. And for that reason, I could have given him a 5 purely because of the lack of stuff he done in the game, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that he didn't have much to do in the game, and when you compare him to Joe Hart, he done considerably less. But in terms of his performance, I thought that the reason I've given him a 6 is just the benefit of the doubt. In terms of the 2 goals we conceded by West Ham, Hernandez's goal, you could debate whether Speroni, even though it looked like he was slightly off balance, you could debate whether with his right hand he probably should have saved that. Maybe he could have at least tried to stop it, but if you look back at the replays, it was a very, very powerful, really fast shot from Hernandez, so not many goalkeepers are going to be saving that. But if we do want to pick out a criticism, which I'm trying to do, not being biased, definitely you could debate, not that I'm going to really say that it's his fault, but maybe Speroni could have been doing slightly better with that goal. You know, he could have tried to get his hand to it, but then when you think about it, Hernandez, great striker, really great power on the ball, great pace, and also, you know, there's a slight change in direction, so there wasn't really a way that Speroni was going to go there and save it. So really, I'm not going to put too much blame on him, but if you want to pick up something negative, maybe you could have done better with that goal. And then in terms of Ayew's goal, the second goal West Ham scored shortly after the first goal they scored, Really great strike by Ayew. Speroni not given much chance because Ayew managed to, step past Dan too easily. Had a shot right in the top corner. Speroni, because he's quite short and because it was literally top bins, there was no way he was really going to save that. So in terms of the goals, you could debate. I'm not really going to say it was his fault, but you could debate whether he should have done better with Hernandez's goal. And then in terms of Ayew's goal, a really great strike. Can't really blame him for that. But one of the reasons I did give him a 6 as opposed to a 5, which I've seen quite a lot of people mention, especially in the Croydon Advertiser, which I do read their website, is, his quick distribution. So in terms of, you could blame Antonio, the West Ham fans certainly did, for the fact that he, instead of keeping the ball in the corner in the last sort of 20-30 seconds of the game, he decided to cross it into the area where there was a 3-on-2, and obviously James Tompkins, being calm and composed as he is, chested it down to Speroni. Speroni caught the ball, and unlike what Wayne Hennessy would do and push the defenders up and try and hoof it long, what Speroni did, he literally ran to the edge of his area. Lovely long throw to Fosu-Mensah to Townsend to Loftus-Cheek to Zaha, and then to score. So the fact that Speroni, instead of just trying to run down the clock and just accept defeat, he fought quick on his feet, got that ball out to Fosu-Mensah, great distribution, got it out quickly, and we were able to set up that counter-attack, which ultimately led to Zaha equalising in the I think it was the 96th whatever minute, but I'm going to round it up to 97. Let's say 97th minute, Zaha scored the equaliser, but that all started from Speroni. So the fact that, unlike Hennessy, where he would boot it out the pitch, Speroni caught the ball straight away, ran to the edge of his area, just distributed the ball really quickly, and if you look back at his celebrations after the game, there's a few nice pictures of Speroni celebrating the goal. You can see what it means to him, and the fact that he started it up, that counter-attack, we've got to give him credit, because, like I said, Hennessy wouldn't have done that. Speroni gives his all for the club and wanted to get that little chance, that little final chance to at least get something from the game, and ultimately for us it did work. But if you look back at West Ham, they were putting men forward trying to get the third goal. Antonio put the crossed in, and because of that mistake we were able to counter-attack. And in terms of West Ham's defence, they were too deep because they were just trying to see the game out, and because of that we were given so much yardage in the midfield, meaning we could get players in the box, get our men forward, and then ultimately we were able to score the equalising goal. But in terms of Speroni's performance, a really great performance from the club legend. I believe he's really close to breaking a few more records in terms of appearances, so hopefully he can carry on being in the team, because I think he's a calm presence in the team, got great experience and seems to be doing well in goal, so hopefully we can keep him in goal. But like I said already, I've given him a 6 because although you could debate Hernandez's goal, he should have done better, there was no way he was going to save Ayew's goal. And the main reason I've given him a 6 is just because of how good his distribution was in terms of setting up that counter-attack for Zaha's goal. But do comment below with your opinions, whether you think Hennessy should start or Speroni should start, and also what you did think about his distribution for the goal. Now to move on to the right-back Joe Ward, who I am going to give a 5. Let Cresswell have the freedom of Selhurst Park to set up the opener for Chicharito, then ballooned across well out of play just before the break to wrap up our nightmare half. Looked a bit better after the break as Palace pressed for a way back into the game, but was taken off for Sako not long after. So Joe Ward here, I've given him a 5, and considering how good Joe Ward performed against Chelsea and Newcastle coming into this game, because obviously Fosu-Mensah didn't play fantastic in the week, you would expect Joe Ward to stay in the team and put in a good performance. And although he wasn't terrible and he wasn't being twisted and turned like he was doing at the beginning of the season, I still think it was a very disappointing performance from him, and that's why I've given him a 5. But in terms of the goal, I said that Speroni debatably could have done better, but most of the blame does lay on Joe Ward, because if you look back at the goal, whenever we play West Ham, Cresswell always has loads of space, so he had loads of space because Joe Ward, cut inside, he was too narrow. Instead of going to Cresswell, he decided to stay quite narrow next to Scott Dann, meaning there was too much space on that left flank. Cresswell was able to run past the space where Joe Ward should have been, put the cross in, and Chicharito, like I've already discussed, scored the goal. So in terms of that, Joe Ward needs to improve his positional awareness. He's a right back for a reason. He should be out on that right flank or the left flank. He should be making sure that no players have so much acres of space that they could put a cross in. So what he should have been doing is, instead of being next to Scott Dann, being that narrow, he at least should have been out wide, at least trying to stop the cross coming in, or at least making it difficult for Cresswell to put the cross into the area. But in terms of that, a really bad decision for him, because the first goal did come down his side, so you put the blame on him. But like I said, this is something we keep picking up about Joe Ward, and especially when we play West Ham. Give Cresswell too much space. Joe Ward gives players too much space, plays too narrow. So what he needs to do, and hopefully Roy will fix this in training, is that he needs to stay out wide and drift in when he has to, and also he's got to try and stop players from getting crosses into the area, because especially the one that Cresswell put in, they're quite dangerous. But in terms of after the goal, what he done in the first half, there was a cross that he went to take, a great opportunity to put a cross into the box, and he ballooned it over, well out of play into the stand. So a chance there to put in a decent cross, he didn't take it. And then really that was just before the break. Other than that, he didn't really have anything of notice in first half. So really, other than playing bad and letting Cresswell have too much space and then ballooning that cross into the stands, nothing really of note in the first half. And then in the second half, of course, most of the players were rejuvenated after the half-time break. We came out better, and although Ward did look slightly better, he still didn't look fantastic in the game. And obviously where we tried to push on in the game, tried to at least get a goal, and ultimately we got the draw in the end. But as we were trying to push on, Joe Ward looked like the weak link in the team and was taken off for Sako not long after the first half or the second half began. So in terms of that substitute, I think it was a great one, because it meant that Jeffrey Slupp moved into left back, Fosu Mensah, who was playing at left back, moved into right back, and then we moved the team around, and there was a lot more balance, because Fosu Mensah gave us a lot more balance in attacking play and defensive play, which Ward did. So overall, not his best game, like I said, because when West Ham countered, he gave them too much space to allow the cross to come in. And in terms of little things he done here and there, a few misplaced passes, so you can't do that when you've got a counter-attacking team like West Ham. And also, a few fouls. When you've got a defender, you've got to be very careful when you concede fouls, and in terms of Joe Ward, there was a few times in this game, unlike against Chelsea, Newcastle, where he made good tackles. Here he conceded quite a lot of fouls, and it was quite a difficult afternoon, and because of him not having the best game, he was substituted. And in terms of Roy making that choice and his game management, in terms of taking Ward off, that was a great choice from him, because it gave us more balance, because we moved the team around, and also it did, like I said, with us pushing to get that goal and get the equaliser, taking him out just meant that the whole team, we got rid of the weak link basically. But in terms of his performance, I think a 5 is a fair result. Like I said, needs to improve his positional awareness, not giving players too much space out wide, and also in terms of passing and fouls, he needs to be more controlled with them, not giving away too many fouls and not giving away possession too much. But a 5 for him, I think, is a fair result. Now to move on to the centre-back and captain, Scott Dann, who I am going to give a 6. Had the first chance of the game, but nodded a header from a corner straight at Joe Hart. Did okay, but got turned inside too easily by Ayew for the second goal. So Scott Dann here, I've given him a 6, and much like the last few weeks, I thought Scott Dann, even though he's not next to his partner in Mamadou Sako, I still thought he put in a pretty decent performance. And although it wasn't a fantastic game in terms of the 2 goals we conceded, but in terms of the rest of the defensive play, especially in the second half, I thought he defended really well, and that can also be said for his partner James Tompkins. But in terms of his first half performance, he had the first chance of the game, so it was quite a dead game, to be honest, in the first half. Both teams looked like they were playing for a draw. Quite a dull game, quite a negative game from both players, or from both managers and the players on the field. But Scott Dann had the first chance of the game, corner coming into the area. He obviously, Scott Dann, being the aerial presence that he is, took the header and it went straight at Joe Hart. So in terms of taking his chance from a corner, something which we haven't quite done a lot this season, but in this game he took his chance. Unlucky with the save by Joe Hart, and Joe Hart was amazing in this game. He was world class for this game against us, but in terms of that save, Scott Dann had the header saved by Joe Hart. He did do okay, so he wasn't fantastic in the first half, but he put himself about a bit, and especially in the second half, I thought he defended quite well. But in terms of the second goal we conceded, Joe Ward was at fault for the first goal by giving Cresswell too much space, and Scott Dann was at fault for the second goal. And you can't take anything away from Ayew. It was a really great strike into the top corner, but Scott Dann, he's obviously tracking his man in Ayew, got turned too easily. Obviously Scott Dann thinking he's going to cut inside to the right, he obviously took the ball on his left, Ayew had a shot and scored. So in terms of that, Scott Dann needs to be more careful and more controlled with his positional awareness. So he needs to make sure that he doesn't get turned by a defender. He needs to make sure that if a player's doing tricks and skills on the edge of the box, you don't move drastically to one side so they can turn around you and get round. You need to make sure that you stay quite central and stop that player from getting the shot away, or get yourself in a position where you can at least block the shot out for a corner. But that's all that he really done, really, because I thought defensively and as the captain, I thought he'd done the right job. He obviously was guilty for not making that challenge on Ayew, because although I said positionally he could have done better by not getting turned, but also he could have at least made a tackle, because where Ayew was positioned, he could have made a tackle, or he could have took the tackle, and actually we could have conceded a free kick. So in terms of that, he had two choices there. Rather than getting turned, he could have stayed tight to Ayew, or conceded a foul, took one for the team, and stopped Ayew from getting there. But in terms of the goal, great goal. Can't fault Scott Dann for conceding a great goal, but we can fault him for the fact that he got turned too easily for that. But other than that, other than getting turned too easily by Ayew, I thought he had a fairly quiet game, done what he had to do defensively, put himself about a bit. So in terms of his performance, I thought he'd done alright. Taking the captain's armband for the last few games, I thought he'd done alright in that role. And although at the beginning of last season it seemed to weigh him down and seemed to affect his game, this season, with him being the captain, it hasn't seemed to affect him well. And unlike someone like Puncheon, he was quite vocal in this game, got the team organised. And when you consider we had to sort of get ourselves together in the second half and push for that goal, push for the equaliser, I thought he rallied the troops, let's say, quite well. But Scott Dann, I've given him a 6 here. Had a fairly solid game defensively, especially in the second half, but really should have done better for Ayew's goal, because he got turned far too easily for Ayew to score that goal. So in the future, he needs to make sure that A, he either makes a tackle, or B, make sure he's close when marking an attacker. Now to move on to his centre-back partner, James Tomkins, who I am going to give a 6. Did okay up until the moment he lost Chicharito in the box, allowing the little man to open the scoring. Incredibly unlucky not to level up a few minutes later, as Hart denied him in the box. Hart then did the same again in the final few minutes with an even better save, tipping a header onto the bar. So James Tomkins here, I've given him a 6, and when you consider quite a lot of the things I said for Scott Dann, I thought that defensively we had an alright performance other than the 2 goals we conceded, and especially in the second half where we had to stay solid, try not to concede a goal in that half and try and push for the goals to win us the game, or in our case draw the game. I thought he'd done a really good job of defending it. But in terms of a criticism, why, even though he had a good performance offensively in terms of headering from corners, the bad downside of him was the fact that for the first goal, I blamed Joe Ward for giving Cresswell too much space, but then also James Tomkins, he did lose Chicharito or Hernandez in the box. Hernandez obviously ran into the box, late run. James Tomkins didn't keep up with him, lost him, and then obviously he was able to score, open the scoring, score the first goal, and set the sort of theme for the first half. So in terms of defending, although throughout the rest of the game he was quite solid, in terms of that moment he lost this man too easily, and by the time he found out that Hernandez was there, he already side-footed it into the goal. So in terms of the first goal, we could put most of the blame on Joe Ward, but also we've got to put a little bit of the blame on James Tomkins for losing his marker in Chicharito, allowing him too much space to score. Because on another day, obviously it's quite unlucky sometimes when you lose your man, but on another day I'm sure Tomkins would have saw the run of Chicharito and would have been man marking him straight away. But on this case, on this occasion, he wasn't quite there. Now in terms of the first half, in the first and second half he had chances to score. In the first half, just after Chicharito scored the goal, he had a really great chance to level the points up, so it would have been 1-1 at that point. Good cross into the area. I think it was either a cross or delivery, so either from a corner or a free kick. From a corner or a free kick. Ball came into, or cross as well, but the ball came into the area. Tomkins, great header, quite a good clean header, and Hart obviously somehow denied it. So yeah, I believe it was a corner. So the corner came in, Loftus-Cheek got the ball back, got it back to James Tomkins. He had a header, and Hart was able to make a save. Great save there, great reaction save. Joe Hart fell to the ground, and Jeffrey Slupp, who hit the follow-up, Joe Hart somehow managed to get off the ground and deflect it up into the air out for a corner. So the fact that he was able to not only make the save from Tomkins from his really great header, Hart, who was having a fantastic game, was also able to get off the ground and make a save from the follow-up from Jeffrey Slupp. So in terms of attacking play, although he was at fault for Chicharito's goal, he almost made up for it a few minutes later by scoring if it wasn't for Hart's great save. And then in the second half, final few minutes of the game, just before we scored, or Zaha scored the equaliser, Hart made another fantastic save. Once again, a cross came into the area, Tompkins got his head on it, and although it looked like it hit the bar, if you watch it again, Joe Hart actually makes a little touch on the ball which changes the direction of the ball, which then makes it come off the bar, and we were able to clear, or West Ham weren't able to clear. Bakary Sako hit it over. So in terms of that chance, great header down, but then also once again a great save from Joe Hart just to tip it, or just to get a touch on the ball, to spin it around and, you know, get it out for a goal kick. So in terms of that, great performance from him. But the main reason I've given him a 6 is, although Mamadou Sako played well against Newcastle, played great against Chelsea, you'd expect Mamadou Sako will be a great loss to the side, and especially when he's played quite well at the heart of the defence, you'd expect him to be a great loss. But I thought James Tompkins filled in for him really well. It was almost as if I wouldn't say it's almost as if Sako wasn't there, but in terms of the performance, Tompkins perfectly put himself about a bit, done a really great, had a really great performance, and, you know, filled in really well for Mamadou Sako. And it does raise the question whether, if Sako comes back and he's fully match fit for Tottenham at the weekend, whether Tompkins or Scott Dan would partner Sako, or whether Tompkins and Dan will continue. Whatever it is, I think that we've got 3 good defenders here, and the fact that they can rotate and play well, whether they're playing in one combination or the other, shows how versatile the players are. So in terms of Tompkins, came into the side, got humiliated midweek against Bristol City, but in terms of Mamadou Sako's absence, I thought he done really well. And when you consider James Tompkins, he was getting quite a lot of abuse and quite a lot of chants from the away fans. He done alright against his old side. You know, he almost scored against them last year at the Olympic Stadium. He also almost scored against them twice here on Saturday at Selhurst Park. So even though it was his old club, like with Andros Townsend last weekend against against Newcastle, the fact that the away fans there were giving him a little bit of stick didn't seem to, you know, affect his play. But I've given him a 6 because, other than the goal where he gave Chicharito too much space and didn't close his man down, other than that, I thought he was fairly solid at defending. And in terms of being a threat from set pieces, he was superb at that. So, you know, he had them 2 chances, and if it wasn't for Hart in the goal, we would have scored 2, 3, maybe even 4 goals. So in terms of the game, people may say that it was quite an even game, but when you look back at the game, Palace, although the first half was quite dead and both teams looked like they weren't going for anything, in the second half Palace dominated, and certainly James Tompkins, if it wasn't for Mamadou Sako, at least one of his or if it wasn't for Joe Hart, at least a few of James Tompkins' chances, you know, would have gone in and we would have gone on to win the game. But James Tompkins against his old club, a very good performance from him. Now to move on to the left back Patrick, who I'm going to give no rating. Only kicked the ball once and ended up pulling his hamstring as a result. Replaced by Tim Fosu-Mensah at left back. At least he managed not to get his head back straight at the opposition striker this time. So Patrick here, I'm not really going to give him any rating because he was only on the pitch for about 10 minutes, and that's purely because the one touch he did get in the game, he put in a alright cross into the area, but in doing so he pulled his hamstring. So as a precaution, although he wasn't playing fantastic, but as a precaution, we took him off and Fosu-Mensah came on at left back. But in terms of his performance, obviously he was only on the pitch for 10 minutes, so didn't really have to do anything in the game, didn't really have any chances to do anything. And in terms of touches on the ball, like I've said, he only had 1 touch, and that was the cross where he actually managed to pull his hamstring. But the only thing I could say that's a positive about his performance is that when you consider that quite a lot of people were questioning him starting after his performance midweek against Bristol City, at least in this game, unlike against Bristol City, he did not head the ball straight back at the goalkeeper where the striker was able to intercept it. So in terms of a positive, I suppose, is the fact that he didn't head the ball straight back to an opposition striker. So that was good. But in terms of getting replaced by Fosu-Mensah came on the pitch, totally changed the game. Although he started playing at left back, when Fosu-Mensah moved back to right back, that completely changed the force of the game. And maybe it was a blessing in disguise in terms of getting back into the game, is the fact that Patrick went off injured and we brought on someone slightly better in Fosu-Mensah, who was able to play better than Patrick done in the last few games. And although, you know, it was a precaution, we took him off because of he could have pulled his hamstring, or he did pull his hamstring. We didn't know how serious it was. He didn't look happy at it, and if you see the replays, when he went off, he looked quite distraught. But I'd rather, even though he's not playing great, I'd rather have him not injured and just taken off and he'll have rehab during the week, as opposed to him carrying on, maybe making a mistake because of his injury and making his injury worse, meaning we have less options at left back. But once again, like I said, no rating for him because he only had one touch of the ball and managed to injure himself in doing so. But I've mentioned this quite a lot already, and especially on Twitter, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise because Fosu-Mensah came on and did change the whole complex of the game. But Patrick Van Aanholt, no rating. Now to move on to Jeffrey Schlupp, who I am going to give a 5. A bit lost in midfield on Saturday. His biggest impact was ballooning across over the bar in the first half. Moved to left back in the second half as Palace switched to a 4-3-3 and his performance improved. So Jeffrey Schlupp here, I've given him a 5, and like I did mention with Patrick Van Aanholt, for quite a lot of the game he was playing in midfield, but as soon as Van Aanholt came off and Joe Ward went off, Jeffrey Schlupp moved back into the left back role and Fosu-Mensah moved to the right back role. And although his first half performance, or when Jeffrey Schlupp was playing in midfield, although that wasn't great and the only impact he had was ballooning that cross over the bar, when he did actually move into that left back role, when we did switch to that 4-3-3 formation with sort of your attacking fullbacks as well as, you know, your defensive midfielders and attacking midfielders, when we changed to that system and we played with Zaha and Townsend as the wingers as opposed to Jeffrey Schlupp playing in that role, I thought it changed the whole complex of the game. But in terms of his performance, the only reason I've given him a 5 is, although he was better in the second half when he was playing in midfield and when he wasn't playing at left back, I thought his performance, he did look quite lost. I suppose that's a way to describe it. He was a bit lost in midfield, didn't look like to be given anything worth to the team. And like I said, when he moved to left back, although he wasn't having a fantastic influence in the game, he gave us a little bit more balance in the team. And the fact that Fosu-Mensah came on and he's right-footed, so he can't really play that well. But when Fosu-Mensah, the pace of him moved to right back and the pace of Jeffrey Schlupp moved to left back as well, that sort of change in formation and change in system gave us a little bit more depth and attacking threat in terms of the way the team played. But in terms of his performance, the fact that he moved positions mid-game shows his versatility. So although he may not be the best winger or the best left back, the fact that he's got that versatility to play in two positions is crucial to Palace, and in terms of that, the manager will be happy with that, and that's a positive thing. And, you know, although he wasn't fantastic in midfield, and that's why I've given him the 5, he still worked hard in the midfield, and although he did look lost, I thought he made some good challenges, put himself up about a bit, and he also did come close to scoring in the first half. So in terms of, I talked about Joe Ward who ballooned across into the stand. Jeffrey Schlupp also had a chance and he also ballooned it into the stand as well, and over the bar, if you want to call it that. But, you know, in terms of that sort of effort, he should be doing slightly better. But Jeffrey Schlupp here, I've given him a 5, and if I was to give him a rating for when he was playing in midfield, it would probably be a 4 or a 5. But in terms of when he moved to left back, maybe would have given him a 5 and a 6, because I definitely thought that when he moved to left back, he gave a little bit more balance to his own performance, but also a lot more balance to the whole team. But Jeffrey Schlupp here, I think a 5 is a fair result. Once again, proving his versatility playing in midfield and also in defence. And although he did work hard, it weren't the greatest performance. But hopefully, in the next game against Tottenham, where we need to be really solid defensively, hopefully the balance of Jeffrey Schlupp and Fosu-Mensah back in the defence, along with support from the midfield, hopefully that will prove to give us a solid base for a solid performance again. Now to move on to the defensive midfielder Luka Milivojevic, who I am going to give a 7. Scored from the right spot after the break with a well taken penalty, which lifted the team and the fans massively. So Milivojevic here, I've given him a 7, and although he did obviously scored from the spot right after the break, so right after half time, we went up West Ham's end, or won the penalty. Great penalty from Milivojevic, you know, sent Joe Hart the wrong way. There was no doubt he was going to miss it because obviously he's very confident with the penalties. But that penalty, not only was it really well taken penalty and it lifted the confidence of the team, but also the fans as well. So we got a goal back. There was a sense of optimism because there was a way we could get back in the game, much like the game against Leicester last season. So we knew that there was a chance for us to get back into the game. It seemed to lift the team, the mentality of the team, and obviously the fans got louder as well. So him scoring that goal was not only good for getting us back in the game, but it did lift the whole performance of the whole team. But in terms of why I might not have given him an 8 for his defensive performance, is because, you know, I talked about Scott Dann getting turned too easily for Ayew stroke, but also we have to Luka Milivojevic, who actually, on the halfway line, he gave the ball away too cheaply. Ayew picked up the ball from the mistake by Milivojevic, and Ayew was able to dribble past Scott Dan and score the goal. So if there's something to criticise Luka for, and the reason I haven't given him an 8, is purely because when he had possession on the halfway, he did give it away too cheaply. And you could debate whether it's a foul. I don't think it was a foul, I just think it was a weak pass. But in terms of that, you can't really give away possession easily like that, and if you do, you've got to at least try and get back, and on this occasion he didn't do that. So Ayew was able to pick up the ball, dribble past Scott Dan, who he knows isn't quite agile, and obviously Ayew was able to score from that. But in terms of his defensive performance and why I've given him the 7, obviously I've given him the 7 because he scored that penalty, but in terms of a defensive performance, putting some vital tackles and interceptions in the midfield, so you know, getting back and making tackles, stopping West Ham, especially in the second half, stopping them from getting chances, making interceptions and stopping West Ham's attack, and obviously also stuck away that penalty. Great composure, sent Joe Hart the wrong way, and like I've said, whenever we see him on the ball, he looks so calm when he takes the penalty. So although there was a slight doubt that if he missed it, the game would have been dead, but once again showed composure with that penalty. But in terms of his performance, really great. And another reason why I suppose you could argue why I've given him the 7 is because in terms of his attacking play, this is the first time I've seen him play so high up the pitch. There was a few times, especially in the second half, where we're pushing for that equaliser after we scored the penalty. He was actually going up, joining the attacks next to Yohan Cabaye, and on the edge of the area he actually won a free kick which Yohan Cabaye obviously hit it, and it got saved by Joe Hart going top corner. So the fact that he was able to know when to go forward, and on that occasion went forward, right decision, and got fouled for the free kick. So in terms of his attacking play, not only was he good defensively, but when he had to attack, he would pick up the ball, drive forwards. And although he isn't an attacking midfielder, I thought that if you've got a player who knows when to go forward and knows when to attack, then that's really ideal. And if you look at someone like Kante, I'm not saying Milivojevic is on Kante's level, but sometimes in a few games you see Kante when he knows that the team or they're playing against are under pressure, so Kante will go forward, and he scored a few goals from getting from his defensive midfield role into a more attacking role. So hopefully Milivojevic, not that I'm saying he's like Kante, but hopefully if he shows in other games coming up, you know, likes of Tottenham and Everton, if he shows the fact that he can actually go up and join attacks and give a little bit of support when we're not under pressure and try and help the attack, then certainly he's eventually going to get another goal from open play. And I think that his defensive performances are great, but it would be so nice for him, especially with his performances being so good, it'd be nice for him to get a goal. But Luka here, I've given him a 7, although we could blame him for Ayew's goal where we gave away possession on the halfway line. I thought that the penalty he took was really great composure there, and also the fact that he put in tackles and interceptions was really key to how good we were defensively in the second half. And like I said already, he was one of the key players, one of the key components in the team that helped us to push on in the second half and, you know, go on to get that late equaliser. Now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give an 8. A quiet first half but came to life after the break, and was so unlucky not to level things up when an effort from distance beat Hart but canned back off the post. Showed flashes of his best after the break and helped Palace to drive forward in the search for that all-important equaliser. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him an 8, and much like what I've described with Luka, I thought in terms of the midfield battle and in terms of the midfield play, I thought that they played really well. And in terms of that partnership with Milivojevic and Cabaye, like what we saw last season, it's a really great partnership and they seem to be playing really well together, and that just, you know, reflects in how well Cabaye played in the game. And I'll go on later on to talk about the man of the match, but in terms of Cabaye's performance, he's up there with one of the nominations, because once again it was a great game in terms of his midfield play, but also his attacking play as well. And the cliche I like to use every week is a game is won or lost in midfield. And in terms of this game, although we didn't win the game, we did win that battle in midfield, because especially in the second half when we were pushing for that goal, in terms of the midfield play, the midfield, we won that battle because Cabaye and Milivojevic played really well in that central role. But much like what I've mentioned quite a lot in this podcast and quite a lot in the last few weeks, it was a quiet first half, so although I've given him an 8, his first half performance wouldn't warrant that because I thought he was really quiet. But after the break, he exploded into form, was playing really well. First of all, he was unlucky not to level things up because he had a shot from the edge of the area. It went off the inside of the post. If that had been a few inches to the left, or to the right, sorry, it would have gone in because Hart was well beaten. So Joe Hart, although he kept making brilliant saves, there was no way he was going to save that. So unlucky with that shot. And then also in the second half, carrying on with how well he was playing, after that chance where he had it off the bar, he also took a free kick, nice free kick, looked like Luka was going to take it. Kapai took it, lovely curled around the wall, and unluckily for us, Joe Hart was there to make the save. So in terms of his attacking play, although he was very quiet and you could say anonymous in the first half, in the second half he came out all guns blazing, put in a really great performance attacking wise, and then when he had the shot he was unlucky for it to deflect off the bar or deflect off the post, and also was unlucky for Joe Hart to make the save. But in terms of his whole performance, especially in the second half, showed flashes of his best. So we know how good he's been in the end of last season when he was at Newcastle. We've seen in this game, towards the end of the game, flashes of his quality, and hopefully he can carry on this form in the last few games, because certainly, although we're only on 4 points this season, Cabaye, you could say, is probably one of these, probably the better players other than Zaha and Townsend in the team at the moment, because his performances from midfield are really great and what should really win us the games. But in terms of second half, he helped Palace to drive forward, so he was one of the main men in that attacking force. Obviously we were searching for that equaliser. He was the main man next to Ruben Loftus-Cheek, trying to get forward, trying to create chances. He done that really well, and like I've said already, I've given him an 8 because in terms of his play, although his first half you could give him maybe a 5, maybe a 6 for his performance because he was quite quiet, quite anonymous. But in terms of his second half performance, he was absolutely outstanding, and that's why I've given him the 8, because I thought he was quite unlucky, obviously, to hit the post when that would have been the equaliser quite early in the second half. And then just after that, obviously Milivojevic won the free kick, he took the free kick, and obviously Joe Hart made a good save again. So Yohan Cabaye, I've given him the 8. If he had scored 1 or 2 of them chances, so like I said, Joe Hart was on great form, but if he had scored 1 or 2 of them chances, obviously we would have gone on to win the game, but it would have shown how good his performance was, because I've said this last week, but he had such a good performance and it definitely did warrant something from the game. So I've said that with someone like Townsend, that he put in a great performance, he warranted at least a goal for it. And in this game I could say the same about Cabaye, because I thought with his 2 chances especially, and also just his overall attacking play in the second half, I thought the least he deserved was a goal. But I've said this already, do comment below whether you do agree with this, but I personally think he could be one of the more important players in the games coming up. Now to move on to Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I am going to give a 6. A bit lost out wide, but tried his best, barely saw it. Moved into the centre in the second half and looked better in that more central role, helping Palace with their push for an equaliser. Made one brilliant jinky run into the box late on, but his cross was terrible and missed everyone. Provided the assist for Wilfried Zaha's late equaliser. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I've given him a 6, and when you consider the high performances he put in at the beginning of the season before he got injured, this wasn't necessarily a disappointing performance, but it certainly was under par with the standards we've seen for him this season. And in terms of the first half, I can understand him not playing that well and, you know, barely seeing any of the ball, and that's purely because he was playing out wide. So we were playing a 4-4-2 formation, playing him out wide, playing Andros and Wilf as the 2 strikers. That didn't really work. And in terms of the second half, when Loftus-Cheek was moved into a more central role and Wilf and Andros were moved out wide with Sako up front as a striker, I thought that actually got the best out of Ruben Loftus-Cheek. So although he looked a threat early on, but he wasn't fantastic because he was out wide, and he did obviously fade as that first half went on. But when he moved into a more central role, where we've seen him play really well for Palace in the last few games, he looked so much better, because in that midfield role, along with Cabaye and Milivojevic, he's able to dictate play, pick up the ball from deep, drive forward. And although he wasn't playing that deep in this game, he was playing quite high up the pitch. He was spreading the ball out to the wingers in Townsend and Zaha. He was looking to get into the box and create attacking opportunities. So in terms of his attacking play, he had some good play in the midfield, and that was mainly in the second half. Because like I said, although he looked lost in the first half, I can understand that, because he barely saw the ball, and that's purely because he was moving out wide. But when Hodgson moved into the centre of the park, we saw the best of him. But because of that, because he faded in the first half, wasn't fantastic, and you could argue whether that's his fault or not, because Hodgson played him out wide. But when he moved into a central role, that's why he had an even better performance. But if I was to rate his first half performance, maybe a 5, because he was quite lost. And maybe his second half performance, I'm going to give him the 6, which I've already given him, because in terms of his attacking play, it was great. There was one chance where he used his attacking ability and his dribbling ability to jink past a few players in the box. He put in a cross, but the cross was quite terrible. No one was there, and no one was able to get in the end of it. But then the one sort of cross, well, not a cross, but the one pass he did supply was the one from the counter-attack to, start Wilfried Zaha's goal. Fantastic goal by Wilf, obviously turning the defender. But the fact that Loftus-Cheek timed that pass just right so that no West Ham player could get on it, picked up the ball from Townsend, great control to stop a West Ham player getting it, passing it to Wilf. That sort of control on the ball and that sort of calmness in the last seconds of the game to get the ball to your winger to score the goal is fantastic there. So although he wasn't fantastic in the game, and although he did look a threat at times, wasn't the best game from him, and although he was involved in some good play in the midfield, other than that sort of chance where he jinked into the box and put that cross in, and the assist for Wilfried Zaha where he got the ball to him, he didn't really have that fantastic of a game, and that's why I've given him a 6. But an overall view of the game, really, he still threatened on occasion, so he still tried to get forward at times, whether when he was playing out wide or whether he was playing in the middle, and he did show glimpses of his ability. But what he's got to try and do now is, whether he's playing out wide or playing in the centre, he's got to try and do that consistently for the whole game rather than fading in sections, which he did here. But Loftus-Cheek, a 6, I think, is a fair result. Now to move on to Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 7. Worked hard for the team. Saw a lot of the ball in the second half, but had to come deeper and deeper to get it. So Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 7, and as you heard from the description there isn't really much to say about his performance, because it was just such a good hard working performance from him. There was nothing of note that was absolutely brilliant, but in terms of his performance, in terms of giving 100% and just playing well throughout the whole minute, so having that stamina to carry on throughout the whole game, that was all fantastic in his game. And sometimes, although he doesn't score the goals or gets the assists, sometimes his work and what he gives to the game, his contribution, does go unnoticed, because certainly in this game I thought he played really, really well, but most people wouldn't notice it, purely because you'll look at Wilf because Wilf scored the goal, you'll look at Kabay because of his terms of his midfield contribution. But I thought in this game Townsend was fantastic. In terms of working hard, he was running up and down the right or left hand side, he was trying to cut inside, trying to put balls into the box, trying to use his pace to get in behind. So he was doing everything you would expect him to do. But also, in terms of the second half, although we weren't getting the ball up to him as we would have liked, because we were playing more central with the likes of Loftus-Cheek and Kabay getting the attacking opportunities, although we weren't playing that wide in the second half, he still, when he couldn't get the ball, he'd go deep, he'd try and pick up the ball, try and drive forward. So instead of just standing there and waiting for the ball to go to him, he'd get involved, go deep, pick up the ball, and try and set up the attack for the team. And that's the thing I quite liked about his performance. His work rate, the determination to carry on, all of that stuff, the drive, is fantastic about his performance. But I can't highlight it enough. I could have given him an 8, but because he didn't have that that final pass or that final end product, I can't give him an 8. But his contribution was fantastic. The fact that he kept running, the fact that he kept going back and defending, the fact that he was getting deep, picking up the ball, and the fact that he won the penalty as well was absolutely fantastic. But in terms of his whole performance, when you look at a team performance, you look at the certain players thinking, okay, these players are working together. But Townsend, his contribution was much more than the rest of the team, because his effort, his amount of energy he put into the game was fantastic. But really, I think a 7 for him, really fair result. Do comment below whether you think he's more effective in a more central role, not necessarily playing as a striker, but playing as sort of a narrow winger, or you think he's better as an orthodox winger playing out wide. But in this game, with us playing a slightly more narrow, he played alright. But like I said, although he had the hard work, he had that commitment, he was playing well for the team, giving 100%, 110% even. Although he worked hard, he still did lack that final pass in other moments. So there was a few chances where he'd gone to all this effort to get an attacking chance, and then didn't have that end product, didn't have that final pass, to get something from the game. But in terms of his performance, great hard-working performance for the team. And like I've said, the fact that he won the penalty, great run into the box there. There was no need for Ogbonna to make that challenge. But the fact that he was able to draw Ogbonna in so he can make that foul, so that he could get the penalty, that sort of knowledge of the game and being clever about the way you get challenged is fantastic. So Andros Townsend here, a lovely hard-working performance from him. Won the penalty, worked hard for the team. But once again, if he had that little final product, he probably would have got a goal that he would have deserved and had an even better performance than he already had. Now to move on to our final player, Wilfried Zaha, who I am going to give a 7. Wanted a penalty for little contact from Fonte in the box, seen them given. Stung Hart's palms in the second half and was always a threat, but it just didn't happen for him. He had one of those games where he tried to do a little too much, but also did find Joe Hart in brilliant form. Until the end as he rattled in a late equaliser. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 7, and although you could say that I should probably give him man of the match, should give him an 8 because he scored that late equaliser, if you look at the game as a whole, he didn't really have a fantastic game, and the only reason I've given him a 7 as opposed to maybe the 6 I would have given him is purely because he scored that really late goal, and it was really important for us to at least get a point from this game considering how good our performance was, and luckily for us Wilfried Zaha did score it. But just to talk about his game as a whole, in the first half, Fonte, stupid challenge, shouldn't really have done it. Wilfried Zaha went down under the challenge. There's no doubt about it, there was contact in the box. And if you listen to Wolf's interview after the game, he said that he spoke with Bobby Madley and he actually said that there was contact in the box. He saw the contact, but wasn't enough for the penalty. But if you look at the rules, I swear the rules are that if there's contact in the box, it's a penalty. You know, you can't just have a little contact and say that's not enough. You know, a foul is a foul. If that was a foul, or if that had happened maybe on the halfway line, you probably would have said, yep, that's a free kick. But if it happens in the box, a foul is a foul, and a foul in the box means a penalty. So in terms of that, although it was little contact from Fonte still clipped his heel, and if we look back at the replay, Fonte even put his hands and pushed Zaha to the ground. So in terms of that, not only did you have him clipping him, which would have been a foul anywhere else on the pitch, you also had Fonte pushing him in the back. Now, in my personal opinion, that was more of a penalty than the one that Andros Townsend won. But in terms of that, on another day, I've seen penalties like that given. That probably would have been a penalty. But because Bobby Madley, because he's so inconsistent, and I don't know why he's a Premier League ref, in other games, other referees would probably given that as a penalty because there was contact in the box. Doesn't matter how big or how small the contact was, contact in the box, and also, you know, that push in the back also does warrant a penalty. But in terms of the first half, he was very quiet, you know, didn't really have any other threats, and that's why I was debating whether to give him a 6. In terms of the second half, you know, I've already said that Joe Hart was in brilliant form, making saves left, right and centre, but Zaha cut inside from the left hand side. I think it was a right-footed shot. Joe Hart made a really great save, but he was always looking to be a threat. So Zaha, whether he was playing up front or out wide, he was always looking to be that attacking threat, trying to get forward, trying to put crosses into the box, but it just didn't quite happen for him. So if you take away the goal, it actually wasn't a fantastic performance from him, considering how well we know he can be. And he had one of those games where we know he's got the skill and ability and he's got the pace, but in this game he tried to do a little bit too much. So he tried to use his trickery too much, used it in the wrong places, didn't use his pace to the full potential. So instead of using it effectively like, say, Andros Townsend did and using it in spells, Zaha tried to overcomplicate things quite a lot, and there was a few times where he done too much. But then when he did do good stuff, he found Joe Hart in brilliant form. So although he did try too hard, let's say, he still, when he had a threat going forward, he still, you know, put chances at Joe Hart, and Joe Hart made a few good saves. And, you know, it's not our fault that Joe Hart decided to turn into Neuer for this game. But, you know, credit to Joe Hart, good performance there, but stopped Will from scoring on a few occasions. So, and then of course, after that, Joe Hart made a few saves in the second half, but then he couldn't save Zaha's goal. Literally 96th minute, 97th minute. Like I said already, Speroni to Fosu-Mensah to Townsend to Loftus-Cheek to Zaha. Zaha's turned a defender, and then there's about 5-6 defenders or players in the box, and Zaha's managed to find the bottom corner. Great strike there. You know, people, that won't be goal of the season, but in terms of importance, that's a really important goal, and hopefully it can help us to kick on this season, because although it was a frustrating afternoon for him, he didn't have the best game, and like I said, he was a threat, but he was always looking to overcomplicate things. In terms of that performance, it was great for him to get the goal. Although it wasn't a fantastic goal, at least he was able to, the skill to turn a defender and find the bottom corner was fantastic. And, you know, he's one of these players that, although he might not be having a brilliant game, he has that little bit of spark, like when he scored the goal, where he can actually pop out when his side need him. So in terms of the goal, looking back at it, I've watched it so many times. He found that yard of space, got past the defender, made sure he could get it onto his right foot, I believe it was, and then he found the bottom corner. Great strike, and he you know, we did deserve a point. We deserved all 3 points really because of our dominance in the second half, but we deserved a point, and luckily for us, Wilfried Zaha got that. And in terms of the West Ham fans chanting he's too crap for England. Basically, I'm not going to swear, but he's basically saying he's not good enough for England. Well, look at Mark Noble. You're saying that Mark Noble should be in the England squad, but he was terrible. He was good in the first half, but terrible in the second half. Let, you know, Andros Townsend go past him and Fosu-Mensah past him for that equaliser. So in terms of saying Wilfried Zaha is too crap for England, he could be... He's probably... I'm not going to say he's the best winger in the league, but he's up there with one of the best wingers in the league. And this performance did show that. And in terms of play, you know, fans criticising him, he's better. You know, they say Antonio's one of the best wingers in the league. Well, clearly not on this showing, because it was his mistake which led to Zaha scoring the goal. So based on that, it was great. And when you think about it, is that Zaha, yes, he would get into the England squad now, no problems, but he's chosen to play for the Ivory Coast. That doesn't necessarily mean he's too crap to play for England. It just means that he was fed up of teams and managers underestimating him, not picking him for England. So really, I just think it's all a load of nonsense that West Ham fans sing that. And really, they can keep their opinions to themselves. But if they really think that Antonio deserves an England place, that, you know, someone like Mark Noble, who yes in his day was good but not anymore, if they think that players like that deserve the England squad, then I don't know why they're saying Wilfried Zaha's crap, because it came on to bite them. And obviously karma did hit. Karma's great sometimes. It came back and he obviously scored the goal, so they can't really say that he's crap and he only plays well against these teams, because he plays well week in, week out, and once again he showed the haters wrong. They're trying to say he's too crap for England, where actually he got fed up with England and went to play for the Ivory Coast, not because he was too crap for England, purely because he was fed up of waiting for England, because people like the West Ham fans just don't know his ability. They think that players like Antonio are better, but clearly they're not based on this showing. But Wilfried Zaha here, if it was based on just his performance minus the goal, it probably would have been a 6, and especially his first half performance, maybe a 6. But the fact that he got the goal, and the fact that yes, he did try and be a threat, and although he did try a little bit too hard in some parts of the game, the fact that he had that attack in the 10, I am going to give him the 7. But once again, such an important goal, and hopefully this will be the goal to finally kickstart our season once again. Now to move on to the subs, Tim Fosu-Mensah and Bukayo Sako. So Fosu-Mensah here, I'm going to give him a 6 just to go over why. You know, he came on the pitch, like I said already, came on quite early in the game for Patrick Fernando, completely changed the game. You know, he did okay, you know, breaking and covering with his pace at a few times, doing his defensive duties right. And in terms of a way to describe his performance, he didn't do too much wrong, so he'd done exactly what was expected of him, whether he was playing at left back, and even when he moved to right back, he played even better, and he played his part in passing that ball to Andros Townsend for the goal. So in terms of Fosu-Mensah's performance, I've given him a 6, because although he's right-footed, he played well at left back, did okay there. When he moved to right back, carried on that form, played really well, using his pace to his advantage, breaking and covering really well. So in terms of his performance, it was great. Bukayo Sako as well, I gave him a 5. That's not necessarily because his performance wasn't great. It's purely because he didn't really have that many chances. And he came on for Joe Ward, obviously, as Hodgson went for the win, moved Jeffrey Slupp to left back, and obviously Fosu-Mensah back to right back. Bukayo Sako came on for Ward. He denied a late equaliser by a brilliant Rice last ditch block in the box. So once again, Zaha late run into the box, crossed it to Sako, and Rice was able to make the tackle, because if he didn't, Bukayo Sako would have had a tap in. So in terms of getting in the area, that was great. Bukayo Sako was able to use his attacking awareness to be able to get on the end of that chance. Probably should have headed in a rebound, or prodded in that rebound a few minutes later, when obviously Tompkins' header hit the bar when Hart made the save. Yeah, you could debate whether Sako should do it, but it's very difficult when you look back at the ball for him to keep that down, because the ball's coming down from the air, coming down at him, so it's very difficult for him with 3 players around him to hit it into the goal. So I'm not really going to say too much about that. But when he came on, he went up top, he gave us a focal point to our attack. So rather than playing with Zaha and Townsend, who aren't strikers, although Bukayo Sako isn't a striker, at least he gave us a focal point to actually try and aim at and aim our attacks to, and he caused problems for West Ham. Even though he wasn't fantastic in terms of being that striker presence that that Christian Benteke is, I thought that Bukayo Sako done that role perfectly well, caused problems for West Ham's defence, and obviously he did play his part in terms of getting us to get that equaliser. But in terms of the next game, I personally think, obviously we don't know injuries and stuff until probably Thursday, Friday, but looking back at the game, the team that played the majority of the second half, so playing Sako at striker, playing Fosu-Mensah and Slupp at left back and right back respectively, if we stick with that sort of formation and that sort of that team which played so well in the second half against West Ham. I don't see why. I'm not going to say we're going to beat Tottenham, but Tottenham, the likes of Swansea and Burnley have drawn against Tottenham. So if we can play really well defensively and solid and attack like we did against West Ham with Sako as the focal point, I think that, I'm not going to say we're going to win against Tottenham, but we might have a chance to at least put in a good performance against them. But Bakary Sako and Fosu-Mensah, 2 great subs off the bench. And although there was quite a lot of people, including myself, looking quite worried when we saw the bench, the lack of options, I still thought that these 2 guys came on and put themselves about a bit. But now just to move on to just a quick small summary on the game. This game was full of sort of incidents, quite a lot of drama. Joe Hart, England goalkeeper, there's a reason why he's England's #1, because in this game he was the guy who prevented us from taking all 3 points. He was making saves left, right and centre, and if it wasn't for the 2 or 3 saves that he did make in the game that were really, really good saves, we probably would have won the game for maybe even 5-2, because if you count the chances where he made a save, they probably added up to maybe a 5-2 win. That's not to say we would have won 5-2 and we would have taken all 3 points, but if he hadn't have made them saves, then maybe we would have went on to win the game, because they were great chances and great saves. And it was an average first half, riddled with mistakes from both sides. Obviously our mistakes, we got punished for them, whereas West Ham didn't, and obviously that meant that going into half time we had a 2-goal cushion. Well, West Ham had a 2-goal cushion that we had to try and overcome. But in terms of the second half, terrific fight back, full of guts, full of heart. Whatever Roy Hodgson said in the dressing room clearly worked, because the players looked up for it and they gave fight and determination in the second half. And it certainly was a 0.1 from the Palace's position, because even though some would argue that we should have won the game because of the chances we had, the fact that we had about 19 shots on goal compared to West Ham's 8, I think it was, the fact that we had this domination, you could say we did deserve all 3 points. But it is certainly a great 0.1, because you could say 2 points lost, but it's a 1 point loss, 1.1, because when you consider we came from behind to win the game, and Zaha got that winning goal. When you consider we had the determination and that sort of character to get from behind, that sort of commitment from getting behind is what won us the point. And that's why I think that the determination to come back from 2-0 down shows how great the team performance was. But to be honest, Zaha scoring the last minute of the game totally just topped off the game. And although West Ham fans, were laughing at us because of the way we celebrated, they obviously were over-celebrating when they beat Tottenham midweek. We have literally had a really bad start to the season. We've just scored a last-minute goal. Of course, we're going to be celebrating like mad, because it's a really great goal we've scored, and it just topped off what was a really great performance, and it sort of cued the pandemonium in the stands. So Zaha's goal set off the crowds. It was an absolutely electric atmosphere, and hopefully in the weeks to come, if we don't make mistakes in the first half and we can put in a performance like this, full of guts and heart throughout the whole game, hopefully better results are to come in the future. Now to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now this week, after such a great performance, and this is obviously the great performance was only in the second half where we managed to, I wouldn't say win the game back, because we obviously went on to draw, but the fact that we were able to get back into the game showed great character and determination from the whole team. But in terms of the Man of the Match award, I always like to pick 4 players, and if I do a Twitter poll, you can only pick 4 players. So the 4 players I put forward were Luka Milivojevic, Johan Cabaye, Andros Townsend and Wilfried Zaha. So these were the players I thought had the biggest influence of the game, were the real man of the matches in terms of having the best influence, being the best players on the field. But they were only 4 players, it's an 11-man game. I could have put Fosu-Mensah on there, I could have put James Tompkins on there, I could have even put, someone like Loftus-Cheek on there, because even though he was quiet in the first half, the fact that he provided that assist for Zaha was fantastic as well. So in terms of the whole team, you could probably give the whole team the Man of the Match award, because I thought the determination, character and that drive to get back into the game was fantastic. But I've picked out these 4 players, and most people probably did agree on Twitter, because I thought that these players had the biggest influence on the game. But in terms of Milivojevic, his attacking influence was fantastic. The fact that he also went forward and attacked a few times and won a free kick was fantastic. Johan Cabaye ran that midfield role next to Milivojevic. got saved, made Joe Hart make a save from his free kick, hit the inside of the bar or the crossbar. So the fact that he was able, the post. So the fact that he hit the post was great as well. So the fact that he not only bossed the midfield in terms of the second half, but he also had chances, forced the save, hit the crossbar. Andros Townsend, like I keep saying every week, his work rate was fantastic, his work ethic as well. The fact that he kept going, he had that stamina to keep going throughout the game, and even though he didn't quite have that end product, that attacking intent and that energy he put into the game was fantastic. And then Wilfried Zaha, although it wasn't a fantastic game for him in terms of the whole game, the fact that he was not having as much influence, trying to overdo stuff sometimes, trying to do a skill too many, but the fact that he scored that important goal, and the fact that alongside Townsend he was one of the most attacking threats, that's why I've nominated him for the Man of the Match award. And when you score a goal in the 96th minute or 97th, however you look at it, I certainly think he does deserve to at least be on this list for being put forward for the award. But for me, I know quite a lot of people disagreed with what was on Twitter, but for me, Johan Cabaye was the clear winner for me. So congratulations, Johan. You don't win a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very solid performance from you once again in the midfield. And it wasn't only going back and defending next to Milivojevic, which he done really well. The fact that he went forward, drove forward, made Hart make a save, hit the inside of the crossbar, the post. I keep making that mistake, but the fact that he made these attacking chances and the fact that he had that influence in the game is why I've put him forward for the Man of the Match. But do comment below with your Man of the Match, who you thought the best player was, and whether you do agree with the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. So now you've had my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match, that concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and James Tompkins following the game.
Wolf, a late equaliser. Did you ever for any moment think that you were beaten?
No. I feel like we just had to keep going and eventually we'd get the goal because so much pressure on them. Eventually we're going to score, so it's a thing where we just had to keep our head down and keep going.
What were your thoughts when you received the ball at the edge of the box? Were you always looking to get a shot in?
I was going to take onto my left foot, but Kouyaté kind of blocked that path. So I thought, let me cut back inside and try and get a shot off quickly. And I managed to get it off, and when I saw it in the back of the net, I was just thinking, finally, because obviously Joe Hart saved literally everything, so it was just a relief.
He was in inspired form, but it's fair to say Palace pretty much battered West Ham in the second half, didn't they?
Yeah, we did, because obviously we needed a point. Every game's important for us right now, and we got obviously great players in the team, and obviously, we definitely battered them, but the main thing is getting the point that we needed.
And what are your thoughts on, just before their first goal, you were challenged in the area. Did you feel like it should have been a penalty?
Spoke to the ref, he said it was contact, but not enough for a penalty. But it's just like, if he doesn't touch me, I'm through on goal. So I don't know, I ain't going to argue that point. Main thing is, I managed to score the goal, managed to get the point we needed, and we'll take that really.
And Luka stepped up to take the penalty. He's cool in those situations, isn't he?
Yeah, obviously when we managed to get the pen, I see Luka step up to it. I thought, it's definitely 2-1 back in this game, because he doesn't miss. So when I see him go, I thought, we're definitely going to score.
Cool. Thanks, Wolf.
Thank you.
James, how did you not score today?
I couldn't do anything else. The first one I could have got a bit more power on it, thinking back, and then the second one I done all I could, and then he managed to save it. He's come under criticism recently, Joe Hart, but he's made 2 good saves off me, and it's just frustrating. Obviously, I tried to score against my old team, and it didn't quite happen, but we got a result at the end of the day, and it looked doom and gloom at half time, but we come back with 2 good goals, and it's a bit of a positive at the end of the day. We didn't deserve to lose the game, that's for sure, and they didn't deserve to be 2-0 up.
Yeah, looking at the stats, it was pretty dominant in terms of shots, especially in the second half. Do you feel like you could have got a victory?
Yeah, no, I think it was a good time to play West Ham, really. Back at their midweek victory. There's some heavy legs out there, and they're not as good as they were, so, it's a good time to play them, and we could have got a win at the end of the day. I think if it goes in at 0-0 at half time, even 1-0, I think we do them really. So it's just frustrating. The position that we're in, luck don't go our way. We've had one off the bar myself, a few off the line, a couple of chances at the end, just nothing seems to go in. But Wilf does what he does best, and then he's got one late on for us.
Cool. Thanks, James. Cheers for that. Roy, a fantastic comeback there. At the moment, does that feel like a victory?
I suppose it does. I mean, it would have been such a harsh blow not to take anything from this game today. I mean, to be 2-0 down at half-time after we'd hit the underside of the crossbar, we'd had balls cleared off the line, and they'd had two distant shots, good shots, but two distant shots, and were therefore leading 2-0. That did seem to be a poor reflection on the half, even though I didn't think we were at our best. Certainly in the second half, we stepped up a gear. There was no question of that. And I thought the players showed a lot of character, because it's not easy when you're bottom of the table. You're 2-0 down, maybe undeservedly, but you are still 2-0 down. To then come back and do what we did in the second half, score 2 goals, albeit one was late. But before that, we'd had so many shots at goal. We'd had shots off the inside of the post. We'd had balls cleared off the line. We'd had scrambles in the 6-yard box. So I would really think that if there's any fairness in the world, West Ham will admit that today it is they who are lucky in a way to come away from Selhurst Park with a point and not us. And it was great for the fans, I thought. I thought the fans were excellent, in particular in the second half when we played a bit better and they could really get behind us. They took the opportunity to get behind us, and it's very unusual in a game of football these days for a game to go into the 96th minute and hardly anyone to have left their seat. So what a reward it was when we've scored that excellent equaliser. And now I'm hoping that the players will take confidence from this. Hope they'll take confidence in the fact that they can be goals down and still produce performances which will get them back on level terms. And also take confidence in the fact that West Ham are not a bad team. They're not having a good start to the season, but last season they were top half rather than bottom half. And I thought that really and truly, if you look at the statistics from this game, you would think there was only one team on the field.
And finally, just away from this game today, the scores just come in that Nye Kirby was on the pitch when England under-17s won the World Cup today. It's a great moment for him.
Excellent, yeah, that's fantastic for the youth teams. We've done it with the under-20s, the under-21s did well to reach the semi-finals. Now we've won with the under-17s. It doesn't surprise me. I was a party to the good work that was going on at St George's Park with the younger teams. I know how seriously they take that, and of course now we're getting the benefit that teams are releasing their players to the national teams, which wasn't always the case, and we're getting the rewards, because I've always believed there was good players in those age groups, and now that we're working at the FA as sensibly as they are working, we're getting rewards, and it's great for Nye. It'll be good for his confidence, and it'll be nice to see him back and try and perhaps to bang on the door of the first team and get a Palace shirt to help us win more games like today.
Thanks, Roy.
My pleasure.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and James Tompkins had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against West Ham. But make sure to come my next view from a post-match review of the game against Tottenham. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace!